Oh, welcome. I hope this is working. I think it is. Welcome back to Fix It Finance. We have a busy day today. Um, if you are on, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Um, Share this with people so they can join. This is a live Q&A session. If you have questions as usual, I ask that you put it in the comments and then we'll take up the questions as we go through the topics. Thank you for joining. Thank you for those of you that watched last week's rerun. I actually got a few questions afterwards from quite a number of people, which was nice. So I'm hoping today's topics, get us going again and we can go from there. My biggest thing is I want us all to learn, right? Like let's all learn in this finance race. You understand? Everybody is just learning as we go. We're all learning as we go. So I'm really hoping you're learning one or two things and well done. Hi, Etim. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining. So we'll get right into it. If you have questions, like I mentioned, put it in the chat even as we go through the topics. Last week we talked about a few things. Don't let me do like Sunday school and be like, who can remind us of what we discussed last week? But if you take anything away from last week, I'm happy you did. If you did not, you can watch it again. It is in the live section of my YouTube page. Okay, so the main thing I wanted to discuss today was the number one mistake people make when they are investing. So I've been investing now for close to 14 years, I think. Yeah, since 2010. Yeah, so 2024 will make it roughly 14 years since I've been investing. And the number one mistake I always made, and I know this might seem like so obvious and whatnot to everybody, but take it from someone that has been investing for a while. The number one mistake you don't want to make is to put in money in your investments and then have to pull it out, aka not having backup funds or an emergency fund for when you're investing. So, for example, when you're investing for the long term. You're not investing for the short term, you know? So, as much as possible, you always want to make sure you have backup funds like an emergency fund so that you don't have to. So, what I would do those days is funny now, but back in the day, I thought I was really sharp. So, what I would do is I would put in, say, $1,000 in my TFSA or, $1,000 in a savings account. And then before you know it, I'm going to need it and then I'll pull it back out and then I'll put in another 1,500 and then life will happen. I have to, something happens and I need the money, then I'll pull it back out. So I didn't necessarily get to enjoy compounding, as much as possible. Back then, I was just doing things, because I enjoyed money, but I didn't really have as much knowledge, of course, as I have today. So the number one mistake that people make when they invest is they never have a backup fund or emergency fund such that you don't have to pull out your investments when life happens. So always, always, always make sure you have an emergency fund no matter what you're doing. Like I always say sometimes, like when I deal with some clients or like not deal with, but like when I work with some clients, I tell people something as little as having $5,000 in the bank can make a major difference in how you even approach decision making overall, So as much as possible, make sure you have an emergency fund. And don't make the mistake I made because you can imagine if I left some of those monies back then, 14 years of compounding. Hey, I will be swimming right now. In fact, I won't even be on this live. I'll be on a yacht somewhere. So yes, if you have questions, let us know. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I actually have a few things to talk about today, and I'm hoping we'll be able to still wrap it up by 10:30. So, if you're just joining us, if you have questions, put it in the comments, and we would go from there. So, if you have any questions on anything from investing to retirement to um, wills, estates, life insurance, all that, put it in there. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about, so during the week, I was marinating on something, ruminating on something, if you ask, and I was thinking about the concept of retirement and where it actually came from. Like who told us we have to retire? Like who came up with retirement as a concept? Retirement is not something, for example, I'm from Nigeria. growing up in Nigeria, you didn't really hear retirement too much. The only people that retired were people that were like civil servants or, government workers, because they had a mandatory age that they had to retire. It wasn't until moving to Canada and like living in North America and just seeing the quote unquote Western world that you realize retirement is such a massive concept here. And then I've been doing a bit of a study on just, men, women, and whatnot that I respect in general and what their concept of retirement looked like. Was retirement something that was in their dictionary? So some of the people I'm going to mention, a lot of you may know them, some of you may not. If you don't, just Google them. So the first person I want to talk about is someone like Warren Buffett, right? And Charlie Munger. So these are two legends when it comes to investing, and they literally were doing the same. They were working until they died. Like Charlie Munger just died recently, and he literally worked pretty much until he was an investor until he passed away. Warren Buffett is still working, and of course he's planning. He's already in his 90s, and he's making plans, in general, just to have transition. And I just wonder about the concept of retirement. We just recently celebrated Daddy Gio's 82nd birthday, and I'm like, he's still going strong and still working and whatnot. And then you look at people like Billy Graham that were preaching the gospel literally till he made his final breath. And then, of course, there are a lot more people in the Bible. For example, someone like Jesus, he was doing his ministry until he left. Paul, Matthew, Peter, just the concept of retirement has really had me thinking about just work in general, and the type of work we do and the type of work we're supposed to do, and when I say supposed, not anything that the world or people in general have defined for us, but just what does that look like to you? Like, why, if you think of the work you're doing now, is that something you could potentially be doing until you decide to check out? And then I think of, again, a lot of people that I don't mean to go dark this morning, but just some people that they work till like they're 65, and then before they turn 67 they've already gone, or before they turn 66. So I've just been marinating a lot on the concept of work, retirement, and what that actually looks like for me as a person, for us as a family, and then just in general. So something to think about, Sha. The work I'm doing, I'm like, for example, when I think of something like Fix It Finance, I'm very grateful for having this platform and this quote unquote ministry, because this is something I can do until I take my last breath, helping people gain control of their finances, setting people free when it comes to financial situations like that. I can do till whenever. So just something to think about. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about today was I wanted to share an investment tip. So if you're like me and you like index funds, um, at some point it starts to get really boring. Just putting, let's say you're putting $1,000 each month in your, index account. You're just putting $1,000, $1,000, $1,000. Someone like me, sometimes I like action. So one of the things I started doing personally, and you can copy if you, decide, is I started focusing on the number of shares that I own instead of just the dollar value. So, for example, rather than setting a goal to have, say, $100,000 in this account, my goal instead is to have 1,000 units or 1,000 pieces or 1,000 shares of this particular fund. So let's use VFV or VOO or VTSAX, whichever one you choose. For example, rather than focusing on, I want to have $100,000, excuse me, of VTSAX, for example, or VOO or VFV. Instead, I'm like, okay, I'm going to own 1,000 units by this time. So last week, we talked about setting net worth goals. If you missed that video, so I talked about having a rolling, our family, what we use is we have a rolling 3-year checkpoint, or a rolling 3-year goal when it comes to our net worth. So, for example, we started really measuring it in 2017 when we got married. So, obviously, I had mine that I was tracking before marriage, but when we got married, we put everything together. We started out negative, of course, because we had debt when it came to our net worth. And then we set a goal that by 2020, we wanted to have X done, or X amount in net worth. We hit that goal. Then we set another goal for 2023. So earlier this year, I did my analysis, measured, we saw that we hit the goal. Now we've set another goal for 2026. So having a rolling 3-year goal, because like I mentioned, the saying from, I believe it's Bill Gates, where he talks about a lot of people overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So rather than put yourself under pressure to achieve all these things and do all these things in 1 year, Why not give yourself 2, 3, even 5 years? 5 years might seem far. You can do 3, you can do 18 months, you can do 15 months, whatever that. Don't be stuck in any dogma of time. You understand? Give yourself a goal. For example, you say you want to acquire a new property every 3 years. That's a reasonable goal. You say you want to increase your net worth by $50,000 every 3 years. That's a reasonable goal. So give yourself time. Don't put yourself under pressure when it comes to a year. So yes, like I was saying, the investment tip I have for you today, if you're an index and chill person, rather than focus on the dollar value, which can kind of get boring, instead focus on the amount of units you're acquiring. So for example, in one particular fund, I have 296 units and my goal is to get to 1,000. So I'm not really focusing on the dollar amount. I'm just focusing on, okay, how many units can I acquire? So that way, even when markets go down, say tomorrow, God forbid, there's a recession, there's whatever, and things are still okay for you, you can just keep acquiring units, and then kind of go from there. That's just another way to think about it. So like I mentioned, if you have any questions when it comes to personal finance, please put it in the comment section. If we've just been discussing different topics in general as we go. Okay. So this one, this is an interesting topic. I've gotten questions about this before because I've kind of shared a little bit of my story with some folks in general. But if you are in your 30s, mid 30s, early 30s, late 30s, whatever that looks like, now is the time you need to start discussing estate plans with your parents. Now, calm down. I'm not saying go and be like the prodigal son. I'll be asking your father how many houses he has so you know what you stand to inherit. That is not what we're talking about here. Please don't help yourself. Don't be wise. Okay. Don't do that. So that's not what we're talking about. However, what I'm talking about is if you're in your 30s, I'd like to discuss, potentially how you can discuss estate plans with your parents. You understand? And the reason you want to do this is because if you're in your 30s, chances are your parents are in their 60s. So if your parents are like 55 and above, you need to start having those conversations with them. Not because you want them to die, God forbid. That's not what we're talking about here. However, you do want to know what their wishes are and if they even have their estate in order. Now, you might say, what's the big deal, whatnot. I just want you to, for me, after this live, just go and Google celebrities, for example, whose estates have not settled. You understand? So some people have been dead several years, but because people are fighting over their estates, nobody has eaten from that estate yet. And it's not even about the eating, it's about the allowing the soul to rest. You understand? So, for example, if your parents have, for example, children that are underage, let's say you're the firstborn, you're in your 30s, you have younger siblings, or for example, you have a sibling that has, some sort of developmental disability, for example, what's your parents' plan for the person? So, what we're going to talk about right now is basically how to discuss those sort of concepts with your parents. Now, I'll share a little bit of my story. So, as most of you know, both of my parents have passed away. They both passed away pretty young. It was not part of their plan, you know. Thankfully, my dad was a lawyer, and because I had proven myself, for lack of a better words. Okay, I guess we can just go right into it. I'll share the story as I go through. Okay, so I'm hearing in my spirit to actually share the story first. Okay, so basically, I had those conversations with my dad before he passed, right? We were not planning on him dying. His death was actually, it caught us off guard. But because I had been having those conversations with him, he actually made some moves that really ended up helping us as his children, when things happened. He had his house in order, so there was no guessing, there was no worrying, there was no, oh, what did he have here or what did he have there, what did he have everywhere, you know? So let's get right into it and discuss how to discuss with your parents, especially if your parents have, in my opinion, if they're 55 and above and you are in your 30s, please, those are the two qualifications, right? And again, I know maturity is not by age, is not by whatever, but the very first thing you definitely want is to have some sort of maturity and independence about you. So, for example, if you are still eating at your parents' table, you understand, it might not be wise to have this conversation with them because then you're just going to look like the prodigal son and you're waiting for them to buy. And, that's just not going to be a good look. You understand? But however, if you've shown to a large extent you're a responsible person, you've weaned yourself off of your parents, and you're genuinely just concerned because, for example, you have no idea, the far reaches of your parents, careers or businesses or whatnot, if you just don't know, if they've not carried you along. You understand? Because most times the average adult just goes about not exactly planning that anything will happen to them. You understand? So the very first thing I would say is make sure you're a responsible person and you've proven to your parents without a reasonable doubt to a large extent that you are responsible. Responsibility means different things to different people. So responsibility could be you're no longer depending on them financially. That is definitely a requirement. You should not, if you're depending on your parents financially, do not have this conversation with them. um, so let's get into how you can actually have those conversations with them. So the very first thing you want to do is you want to ask them just questions in general, in terms of do they have a will? You know, do they have a will? That's the very first thing. Especially if your parents live in North America or if they frequent North America, even if they are in Nigeria, make sure they have a will. And make sure, especially if they are in Nigeria, that the will is filed officially with the courts. Because if it is not, it's just paper, it's dust. You understand? But if it's actually filed officially with the courts, then it can hold up. You understand? So you want to make sure they have a will. You understand? A will that lists all their assets, all their liabilities, and what their wishes are for everybody in general. You understand? So when I would have this conversation with my dad, I would just ask him, like, oh, daddy, I've just been reading a lot about all this personal finance stuff and reading about estate planning and all these things. And I just thought I would have that conversation with you. Do you have a will? What are your wishes? You don't have to discuss it with me. And I would tell him all that. You don't have to tell me. You don't have to discuss it with me. I just want to make sure that you have everything in place such that if anything were to happen to you, we would know what you want. We would know what you would have wanted to happen, you know? And my dad took the conversation very well. So he actually would open up and talk to me about stuff. You understand? And of course, he had seen that I was responsible and he had seen that indeed I was learning on some of these things. So that's how you would approach the question, that you've just been doing some stuff for even your own self. For example, let's say, for example, my husband and I, when we were working on our will and just our estate in general, that's a good opportunity to talk to your parents about it and be like, oh, hey dad, hey mom, me and my wife, me and my husband, we were working on our will and power of attorney and whatnot. And we just wanted to find out if you and dad have the same thing. If you don't, we highly recommend, because no offense, your parents will not want to take advice from you. So I would suggest not giving them financial advice to a large extent, but just asking them if they have it, if they don't have it, how to get it and why it is important, so that those that they leave behind will know what their wishes are. Ask them if they have a will. Do they have life insurance? You understand? Things like that. What sort of assets do they have? What do they want to happen to those assets when they go? If anything were to happen to them, for example, what are their wishes for your younger siblings? For example, someone like me, I had a minor that's as a younger sibling, and my dad put it in there clear as day. This is what I want to happen in order to be able to take care of the minor amongst us. You understand? We have a question here. What if they had both assets and debts? How do you deal with the debts if they willed all the assets to you, especially if the negative far outweighs the assets? That's a very good question. So I would clarify something. So this conversation is not about inheritance. I don't know why I feel the need to say that. Let's start from there. This conversation is not about inheritance. It's about making sure that whatever their wishes are gets taken care of when they go, and to make sure that they have everything in writing such that no one can bamboozle you. For example, I'm the executor of my father's estate. He wrote everything down. So nobody can come tomorrow and say my father owes them 2 million naira, because I know it does not exist. So I will not be running from pillar to post and put myself under pressure. You understand? So if the debts outweigh the assets, that's okay. There's nothing wrong. The person that is the owner of the assets and the debts is who is responsible, not you, the child. You understand? So the estate is what will be in debt, not you. You understand? And those are the reasons why you want to have some of those conversations, because you want to know what you're going to have to deal with if anything happens to them. And keep in mind, they don't have to give you any details. So you're not asking this conversation to be all up in their business. You understand? you're just it's like it's like sowing seeds. You're just throwing the seed there. How it germinates is not up to you. You're just going to throw it out there like, hey dad or hey mom, I was, I've been learning a lot about finance and learning a lot about estate planning. And, I just want to find out if you guys have this, that, and the other thing. If you don't, I think it's a really good thing to get. Even me, myself, I'm getting it. And then you kind of discuss from there. And that opens up, this is not a one day conversation. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a conversation you will sprinkle some dust in Easter, then you sprinkle some other dust maybe at Thanksgiving, then more at Christmas. And it slowly but surely starts to open the door. For example, for me, I started having this conversation with my dad. It was over a rolling 3-year period before he finally passed away. And the year before he passed away was when he opened up a lot of stuff and just said, okay, this, that, and the other thing. Because we had been having those conversations, he could see, he could trust me. So even some of his investment plans, some investments he wanted to do just before he passed away, he discussed them with me, and I told him, this word, I don't think it makes sense. And thankfully, he listened and he didn't go through with it. He had no idea he was going to pass away the year after. If he had done that investment, his entire estate would have been in trouble. You understand? So again, to answer your question, Michael, um how so basically, if the debt outweigh the assets, it's not necessarily going to be your problem, because the estate of that person is what the debtors will have to go after, not you. And that's why you want to make sure your parents have it in writing, because if you're, for example, the inheritor of the estate, and let's say the estate has debt, you understand, those, I don't want to go into all that in this call just because of time, but you just want to make sure that and you know what their wishes are to deal with it. you know Especially in a place like Nigeria, when somebody dies, some people will come out of the woodworks that you do not expect, wanting to do things with your parents' estate. Anyways, I hope that answers your question, but thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Okay. So that's, talking to your parents about estate plans about their estate in general, asking them if they have a will. The biggest thing is they should have a will, and they should register that will with the courts. You understand? If they're in a country like Nigeria where it's required to be registered with the courts, like make sure they have their wishes in writing. They don't even have to discuss it with you. Just make sure they have it in writing what their wishes are. If they don't have life insurance, make sure they don't have to get life insurance if they don't want to. For example, if the estate is, you know, endowed enough, they don't necessarily need it. But just make sure they have a plan and they've written down their wishes, what they want to happen. That's the biggest thing, that they write down what they want to happen. Again, if they are 55 and over, just have it written down. And then for those of us that are on this call that are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever age you are, especially if you have people that are financially dependent on you, you need to have a will, you need to have life insurance. Okay? So go and get that done. Don't wait till you're 55 and your children have to discuss it with you, because I've discussed it with you today. Okay? Sounds good. What other topics do I have here? Okay, so we talked about retirement as a concept, what that looks like. Just looking at the lives of people like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Billy Graham, Daddy Adeboye. I just thinking about, what does retirement mean to you? These are people that literally were doing whatever they wanted, whatever they've been doing until they passed away. And it has me thinking a lot about the concept of work, retirement, and what that looks like in general for me as a person, for us as a family, and just for our world in general, especially with the way things are changing rapidly. Just what I feel like there's going to be a massive shift coming down the pipeline soon. What that looks like, I think I have a picture, but I don't know. But it's just something to marinate on, something to think about. I talked about, I give an investment tip. If you're an index and chill person, rather than focusing on the dollar figure, focus on the amount of units you're acquiring. So if you're setting a goal, you can set a goal, say for example, to own 1,000 units, 1,000 shares of a particular index fund. So rather than focusing on how much you're putting in per se, focus on how many units you're acquiring and set goals in that light. I also talked about the number one mistake people make when investing. So the number one mistake I made when investing was not having an emergency fund, such that every time I would invest, I would then need to pull it out soon after to use it, because life was lifing. So make sure you have an emergency fund as much as possible, so you're not having to withdraw money that you've already invested. Um, One thing I wanted to talk about real quick is when it comes to scammers. I don't know about you, especially if you live in Canada, the scamming is becoming too much. It's ridiculous. I get a text every day. I block them every day, and somehow I still get a text every day. Or you get an email, or you get a phone call. Me and my husband call them Nadem. When we see the number, we're just like, it looks like Nadem. You just ignore it. You understand? But it had me thinking about something, and I wanted to share. In my opinion, if you live in Canada, I'm fully convinced the government wants you to take care of yourself. That's why they're not doing anything to really fish out or really penalize some of these scammers. And no offense, to an extent they really can't, because some of the scammers are calling from other countries. They're not even in Canada. You understand? um Oh, thank you. There's a question here. It says, since the units translate to dollars, is there really more advantage of focusing more on the units than the dollars? No, there's no advantage. So if you know, when I started, I talked about if you potentially get bored, just putting the same $1,000 every month. For example, let's say you're investing $1,000 every month, it can get boring. So instead, if you want to choose something else to focus on just to keep you motivated and to keep you going, you can focus instead on the amount of units you're acquiring instead of just how much dollars you're putting in. So it's just another way to look at the same, it's another angle to look. It's just another angle to look from. So no, there's no difference. There's no advantage to focusing on the units. It's just a different way to measure. You understand? It's kind of like we talked about, your net worth, like I mentioned earlier. So rather than just focusing on how much your net worth can grow in 1 year and put yourself under pressure, just if you spread it out a little bit more, you give yourself a wider view to look at. So that's just, again, it's like just going through a wider view. It's yeah. Hope that answers the question. Thank you for the question. Okay, so I was talking about scammers. I'm fully convinced that the government wants us to take care of ourselves. So if I were you and I was living in Canada, one thing I will make sure I definitely have is something called identity theft insurance. Now, you might be wondering, oh, what is identity theft insurance? So I have this nice little article here from Equifax. If you know Equifax, they're the people that cover they are one of the companies that handle credit scores, which we'll discuss in one of the lives upcoming. I have so many topics to discuss, but I can't do everything in one day. So, but this one I wanted us to get. So make sure if you're on this call and share it with a friend, tell them what to do. Get yourself identity theft insurance. It is 2024. It's no longer a luxury. It is a requirement to have identity theft insurance. And it's so easy to get. It's so cheap too. If you have home insurance, renters insurance, auto insurance, just add it as an add-on. So for example, ours is through our we use the same insurance provider for home and auto. So we have our property and our vehicles on the insurance. Please just ask them if they have identity theft insurance and add it on. It's like $13 for the whole year, I think. Don't quote me on that. Whatever quotes they give you, it's literally worth it. Even if it's $100 per year, it's worth it. And the biggest thing is these are the things identity theft insurance will cover. So in terms of recouping your money, that's not necessarily something they will cover. However, if someone steals your SIN number, for example, and they use it to apply for credits in different places, blah blah blah, the biggest thing that's going to be a factor is the time you're going to waste trying to fix and call everybody. I mean, no offense, how many times have you been on the phone? You're trying to talk to customer service rep, you're waiting 45 minutes. Imagine having to do that because someone opened 10 accounts in your name. So the biggest thing, these are the things that identity theft insurance will cover, right? So fees for a case manager and to restore your identity, like a specialist to actually help you do that, they will be the ones to make the call for you. They will be the ones to talk to the banks, to the companies, to the credit card companies, blah blah blah. Legal fees, for example, let's say they end up dragging you to court because someone took out $20,000 in your name and they just didn't pay it back. It will cover legal fees, cost of replacing important documents, your driver's license, your SIN number, blah blah blah. Any lost wages associated with the identity theft. For example, you work in the bank, someone stole your identity, and of course, because the bank can't have let's say one of their policies is you can't have, you know, debt that's owing more than 90 days. Unfortunately, you didn't know about this one and you lose your job. They will replace lost wages associated with the identity theft. Um, they will put any necessary alerts on your profile, and then of course any charges from the credit card companies or the bank and all that they will cover. So you definitely want to make sure you have identity theft insurance in 2024 because these scams are becoming too much. It's ridiculous. I block an average of a number a day at this point. Like you just see one text, oh DHL, your package is me that I've not ordered anything from DHL, or somebody somewhere sent you $300. The one I saw that was recent that I thought you actually looked legit. Interact. Someone sent you Interact from no, who was it? Was it from Arby's? I don't remember what it was. It just looked so legit. Even me self was like, "Ah, wow, these guys are getting sophisticated." So please, you self be sophisticated and get your own insurance. Identity theft insurance is important. Get it and get it today. Call your insurance company provider. Ask them what it is going to cover. If you know you so make sure it covers these things at least. Ask what it's going to cover, and then it's very cheap when you get it through your home or auto. Just add it as an add-on. It's very, very cheap. Like I said, even if it's going to cost you $100 per year, it's still worth it. Um, the other thing is, in some cases, this is what it doesn't cover. So the $20,000, for example, let's say they use the identity to steal $20,000 from your credit card or something. Now, the credit card company has to cover some of those, especially if it's an identity situation, right? So, you always want to ask them what it covers, what it does not cover. But the biggest thing you want it to cover is to make sure they will cover these three are the most important thing. The person that will actually sit on the phone with RBC and be telling them, no, she's not the one that did it. You need that person. Any legal fees, for example, if they sue you to court or whatnot because they took out money in your name, you didn't repay. Obviously, it's not you that took it out, but they're suing you because it's your name. The legal fees to deal with that. And then, of course, the cost to replace your identity documents. You understand? Driver's license is not free. Your SIN number is free, but there are other things you would have to replace. So make sure you get at least those three. Get identity theft insurance and get it today. Please and thank you. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay. um Last but not least, I would should I do one more topic or maybe we should just wrap it up here? I'm trying to think. I have quite a bit, but I think if there are any, I'll take a minute just to ask if are there any questions before we wrap it up. Anything anybody has questions about so far from all the things we discussed. We talked about indexing and chilling. We talked about the mistake you make when investing. We talked about retirement. We talked about scammers and getting identity theft insurance. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'll take one more topic. The other topic I wanted to talk about today was the crypto bull run. If you're like me and you're a crypto enthusiast, enthusiast means you only put, small inside just to see what the market is doing. But yes, I wanted to talk about it. The crypto bull run it's already happening. If you don't know what that is, so crypto has its seasons. It's like, there's summer, there's winter, there's fall, and there's ice cold winter. Anyways, so basically, like any regular market, there are seasons of plenty and there are seasons of quote unquote dryness, right? So if you know, crypto was in a season of dryness for a long time. Nothing was happening, nothing was moving. Some coins did not move for 2 years, 3 years. You understand? But activity, I don't know if I can speak my language. Activity have starts. There's a lot of movement. So basically, the reason I'm bringing it out is not to give you advice on crypto or whatnot. It's just basically we've seen enough, not enough, but we've seen more than one now. At least I've seen since 20 whatever when we started looking into crypto. Bull runs and bear runs happen. Okay. Whatever you do, just make sure people are not taking profit on your head. If your dentist is talking about Solana, don't go and put money inside because at that point it's already too late. It's just you they will use to eat. You understand? If your doctor is giving you advice to go and buy Ethereum, at that point, okay, It might be, it's just, again, I'm not going to go too much into it, but basically, be wise, use your head in this situation. If it's already, again, there's a lot to say about crypto. I find it very interesting and very fascinating. And to be honest, I didn't care for it before, but just the activity is enough to make a soap opera. But whatever you do, the bull run is here. Of course, if you saw the price of Bitcoin, it's now at 90 something thousand Canadian dollars. When they were saying it was going to go to 100K, 400K, I thought it was a joke, but wow, stunned. So it's happening, whether we like it or not. The crypto bull run is here. Prices are going up every day. Just make sure they don't take profit on your head. Don't be the one holding the bag at the end of the day. Don't be the last person standing. You understand? Yes, I won't say more than that. A word is enough for the wise. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our live today. Thank you all for joining. This was a really good one. If you learned something, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell someone to tell someone, and I hope you learned something. We'll be back again next week, and we'll be discussing more topics then. I will be discussing taxation next week. So we'll talk about taxes. It's tax season. Woohoo! And then we'll kind of go from there. And if you are in my city, I will be teaching at Potter's House tomorrow. Understanding how money works. I will be teaching on banking and the credit system, taxation, estate planning, and investing. So come prepared, and thank you so much for joining. God bless you. I'm very, very excited. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Pam. Alrighty. See you all next week. Bye.